In this video, it's a 1965 Nissan Cedric, sold new in Australia, now here in the Netherlands. So let's take a look at this truly magnificent steed. It's a little careworn in places, but then it's pretty much a one-owner car from new. I think the first owner owned it from 1965 in Richmond in Australia. Until the early 2000s, I believe. It went to a collector and then got sold to a collector friend of mine. I mean, the styling is, it screams many 1950s British cars, all of which were trying to ape American cars. So you can definitely see some Humber Hawk here. There's a bit of PA Velox maybe in the windscreen. Yeah, it is very, very inspired by Americana, but also by the British take on it. You'll note the quad stripes down the bonnet is a bit Pontiac-esque. Initially, when this generation of Cedric came out, they had stacked quad headlamps, apparently inspired by a Japanese train. For 1960, that was pretty revolutionary. I think the Humber Super Snipe, as it happens, only got quad headlamps in 1964, as I recall. But the Cedric had them from new. This is the facelift grille, and frankly looks a lot better. So it's a Cedric 1900, and we'll take in all the styling. You know, it is just very, very clearly inspired by other British cars, and other British cars, by some British cars, because it isn't British. And there we go, Cedric Deluxe. You'll notice there are no badges saying anything about who the maker is of this car, and that's because it is a Nissan. And it's a baffling history. I've been trying to get my head around it this evening, actually. Oh, thank you. But I think that's the Cedric badge itself. They came up with a specific badge for the Cedric. But Nissan is the overall global company. Datsun was kind of used for some models, but it tended to be smaller austerity models. And Nissan made forklift trucks and luxury cars, whereas Datsun made what became the Sunny and the Bluebird and things like that, the everyday cars. This was meant to be a luxury car, although having only a 1.9 litre four-cylinder engine, perhaps it doesn't feel quite so luxurious. We'll have a nose under the bonnet shortly, but first of all I think we'll have a nose inside. Oh, should point out this is apparently the middle wheelbase, so they started off shorter than this, but then they lengthened the rear doors, and that was the custom Cedric. But by the time this one was made, that was the standard, and then the custom had longer front doors. And you could get 6-cylinder versions as well, which had a longer nose. So I quite like the proportions of this one. I think they're about right. So there we go. We got the knee knocker. Someone said on the PA Velox why they called knee knockers. I demonstrated very well that when I got in earlier and bashed my knee on it. But yeah, it's that as your knee goes past there, you can give it a mighty clonk on there. So my recommendation is don't have such knobbly knees. That's certainly one solution. But here we are, we've got a ribbon strip speedo. Oh sorry, reflections a go-go there. Get that to focus, maybe. But yeah, it's all very clearly BMC inspired, and that's unsurprising because this was, I think, only Nissan's second fresh design after building A50s under license. This was effectively to replace that car. The little Bluebird was the other offering. So we've got controls variously down here. It really is struggling a bit. It's in manual focus. There we go, that'll help. So we've got switches here for lights. Out they come. Oh, and look at that, you can even see the dashboard light up today because it's got a bit gloomy. A blanking plug because it's a deluxe, and that usually means base model. Choke down here. CL for cigarette lighter, and wiper control. Oh yes, we'll get to that, don't you worry. So it's there's the wash, and then pull out for the 1, 2 speeds. Oh, the luxury. You'll note also a column gear change. And it's a bit unusual because first is away and up and second down, and then it pings back to go into third and fourth. So it's 4-speed gearbox, really nice precise action. Reverse is a bit of a pull it out and jab it down, and that is into reverse. But most cars with a 4-speed on the column would actually have first towards and up rather than away and up, but that makes more sense away and up really, because that's just like a normal gear change turned on its side. So makes sense. There's a hint of the Nissan-ness, just one, and it's slightly off center, so that's the OCD freaks now freaking out all over the place. And then there's my sandals. But yeah, plenty of space down here. I was going to say, I assume there's a manual dip switch. Oh, there it is. Yeah. But lovely original carpet. Amazing interior quality of the seats. This has never been retrimmed. This is just careful ownership. They were covered in plastic, much like the B-posts still are. When my friends picked this car up late last year. There's a radio. Don't know if it works. Probably not, because I think it was turned on. I don't even know what those switches do. But yeah, look, we've got a decent heater. There's a glove box, and lovely, there's a little plug-in cigarette lighter. Apparently this was so you could plug in your shaver. That's an original optional extra. And there are some documents here. Like South Australia Motor Registration Division. Important rules to be observed by the motor vehicle drivers. Insurance policy, costs from 1967, the maintenance handbook. Look at that. So Car Cycle Pty Limited is the company that sold the car new. And there we go. 9th of the 11th, 65 was when I think the first lubrication was carried out. Brilliant. Apparently it hasn't been serviced since then, but maybe they just didn't quite keep up with the paperwork, because it feels very lovely indeed. There are fresh air vents there, so that can allow fresh air in here to cool your feet, and that is the clang, that is the bonnet release, and it's an umbrella handbrake of the twist, and it goes back in variety. But yeah, very upright driving position. We will naturally do some wiper observations, and look, even that is just nice. Lovely. Yeah, jolly decent motor vehicle. Oh, I must show you the indicator lights because they're quite delicious. Look at that. Such a quiet indicator. You just see the amp meter moving, or the ammeter even. That's delightful. Right, let's step into the back, if you please. So here we are in the back. It's all a bit dark and gloomy, but the camera's just starting to adjust, but plenty of headroom, even for my spiky hair. It makes some interesting noises. There's loads of room for my knobbly knees. I've got my own little ashtray here. And one thing I do like is we've even got courtesy lights in the doors. And lovely action. I don't know where cars went so wrong when window winding action got so poor. Again, there's lots of remnants of the plastic that was left protecting everything. It's quite astonishing. I mean, the word time warp gets used far too often, but this really is it. It's like sitting in a brand new one. I can't imagine very many people have sat here, yet here I am. I'm a lucky man. And you notice we've even got opening quarter lights in the back. That's quite posh. And then door locking knobs, which is the only thing that feels modern. I'd kind of expect the latching to be done with that handle, but no, it is done on the knob, so to speak. Right, you have a peek at the engine, or do you want to look in the boot? Oh yes, I think the boot is definitely worth looking at. Because not only have we got a fantastic period suitcase in here, we've got what looks to be an original mat at the bottom. we've got the original number plates. Look at that. That's pretty impressive. And I think it might even have a tool wrap in it. Oh, someone's gloves. But you know, the original jack and everything. It's all absolutely marvellous. So yeah, again, just like going back in time, really. Oh, not quite. There we go, job done. Now we shall turn our attention to the front. Before we get in, I'll just point out that the number plate flips up so one can insert one's starting handle. Delicious. Right, see if I can find a catch. I can. Watch the beautiful mechanism. It won't quite lock. Needs a bit of encouragement. There we go. That's now locked, nice and solid. Apparently it does get rather in the way when you're working on the engine, but you can't have everything, can you? And here is the engine. The engine is somewhat inspired by Austin's B series engine, but it's actually Nissan's own design. So it's very inspired. It's got the same non-cross flow sort of manifolds going on. Got a big cartridge oil filter down there. There is a petrol primer on the fuel pump down there, and the sight glass on the carburettor, so you can actually see where your petrol level is. That's quite extraordinary. Don't get features like that on cars these days. But 1.9 litres and about 95 brake horsepower, which is not bad going from a single carburettor. That's an SAE figure, and I think an MGB was about the same from 1798 with twin carbs. Being a Nissan, they do tend to chuck in an underbonnet light. Oh, and it works. There we go, Nissan Motor Co Limited. Model for year 1965. There we go, 1883cc, 95 brake horsepower, which they confirm is an SAE figure. And yeah, that's really not a bad power output at all. It's a short stroke engine, so it's perhaps not quite as tall as a B series engine. And the B series was always fairly long in stroke. This is short stroke, and makes it quite revvy. And oh, what we got over here? Caution for handling alternator. So yeah, connect earth cable to the positive post of the battery. It is a positive earth vehicle. Right, I'm going to shut the bonnet, which means there we go. Beautiful mechanism is released, and then the bonnet does shiver somewhat, it must be said. That's proper metal. Right, I shall get you set up and we shall go for a drive. There are no seat belts, so I don't have to worry about that. So we'll start the engine up. How's that for a quiet tick over? Pull the lever out, down we go. We are in reverse. And we're on a dirt road at the moment, and I'm going to put some lights on. Lovely first gear whine, straight cut gears. And away we go, and we're driving over a dirt road. The ride is remarkable. I can't help thinking this was a car that probably drove over a few dirt roads back in its day in Australia. But yeah, it's lovely. And it goes really well over speed humps as well. I hope the sunlight isn't too blinding. We shall go to the right. Keep an eye out for cyclists. And even though we're in a right-hand drive car, we are in the Netherlands, so we drive on this side of the road. Lovely action. And a slightly offbeat note to the engine. It reminds me very much of my aunt's Morris Oxford, which did use a B series engine. But like I say, this is Nissan's own version, inspired by the B series, so it's got a shorter stroke. So if we go down here, it picks up really well. And I think this was the first year that they had recirculating ball instead of worm and peg steering, and it must be said that the steering's lovely. Just sort of goes exactly where you want it to go. Feels absolutely spot on. It's about 40 miles an hour according to my strip speedo, which is about 60 kilometers. That's what we're allowed to do here. Oh, you've been waiting for it, haven't you? So here we go. There's my screen wash, and oh, that's quite a pleasing little action, that, and it does a reasonable job of cleaning the screen ahead of me. It's not brilliant, because this layout of wiper never is brilliant. It was originally conceived for split windscreens, so it does leave a big triangle unswept in the middle of the windscreen, which I will not call a triangle of doom. Maybe just a triangle of inattention, because the triangle of doom is where the passenger arc doesn't meet the driver's arc and leaves a triangle which dribbles. There are no dribbles going on. I would like for the record to point out there is no dribbling. And oh yeah, the speed humps, you may not have noticed, I really hadn't. This car just floats over them. It's truly lovely. Oh, I probably don't want to go down there because I think that's the actual motorway. We don't want to go onto that, so we should go this way. Beautiful Dutch farmhouse there, or barn as they're traditionally known. But despite the short stroke nature of the engine, it's quite good for torque. So, you know, we can slow down to, you know, we're below 30 miles an hour there, and it picks up not just cleanly but quite punctually as well, and that's quite impressive in my book. And thankfully the brakes aren't bad. It squirms around a little. I wonder if they're drum brakes. I probably should have checked. I was going to check, I did not check. But yeah, this car has been so well cared for all its life. So while the sun has bleached the corners of the paint a little, this interior is absolutely first rate, and to drive it feels very fresh, very new and vibrant. It's just lovely, and I'm not having to fight to keep it in a straight line. It steers quite nicely, and yeah, it goes far better than you might expect. I mean, it's very dated when you think back, 1965, but then this was one of the last of this generation, this first generation of Cedric. I will have a video coming shortly on a second generation Cedric, which I actually recorded a month ago, but for various reasons, here I am driving this car today. I think we should go that way, away and up for first. Yeah, it's a lot more pokey than I expected. I was thinking 1.94 cylinder, it's the baby of the range really, but it feels a lot more lively than equivalents, and by equivalents I'm going back to the 1950s, to the E-Type Vauxhall and the Ford Consul Mark II, which I think was introduced in 1959. So I guess they're equivalent, woohoo, to this car, but yeah, they would have been replaced by later versions by the time this one was made. It did take Japan a while to catch up. Oh, 80 km/h speed limit. That's 50 miles an hour, which we are now doing. Now, unsurprisingly, it's going to be a bit under-geared for motorway work, but I have been told it will sit at 60-65 very happily indeed, for as long as you want it to, really. Where are we going to go here? Let's go that way. third gear. Oh, Daihatsu YRV there. Sorry, the car's complaining because I was looking at younger models. And one detail I love, and I've seen this on other Datsuns, there's a dot which is where the temperature should be. It's actually slightly below the dot at the moment, so I should write a stiffly worded letter of complaint to Nissan to point this out. But yeah, this is just lovely. What an amazing car. A road surface that is ribbed for your pleasure, but the suspension's just absorbing it all. It's absolutely marvellous. It's definitely a car you can just keep on driving, and I know Patrick, who owns it, likes this car a great deal, and I cannot blame him in the slightest. So there we go, that was the Nissan Cedric, a 1965 example of the first generation Cedric. Like I say, we will have a video coming up on the second generation Cedric very soon. My thanks go to Ivan and Patrick for allowing me to dabble with their fantastic collection of cars. So I shall say, thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe before you go, and I shall see you in a future video. Farewell.